Listen, the Cleveland Browns just beat the Cincinnati Bengals, and I need y'all to understand what actually happened in this game. Because if you just looked at the box score, if you just saw the final numbers, you might have missed what this really was. Shedeur Sanders went out there in the first half and looked completely lost. I'm talking sacked 6 times, 11 completions on 22 attempts, 111 yards total. The offense couldn't move. The line couldn't block. Receivers weren't getting open. It was ugly. Real ugly. But then the second half happened, and suddenly this kid flipped the script entirely. Suddenly the Browns are moving the ball. Suddenly Jerry Jeudy is making plays. Suddenly they're winning the game 20-18 against a division rival with Joe Burrow on the other side. And now everybody wants to act like they knew it was coming. But hold on, because this isn't just about one good half of football. This is about what we've been watching all season, what the media's been saying, and what this front office has been doing with this young quarterback. Let me walk y'all through this from the beginning, because the context matters here. The Cleveland Browns drafted Shedeur Sanders, and from day one, there's been this weird energy around how they've handled him. We're not talking about a 6th-round project quarterback. We're talking about a guy who came in with hype, with a name, with expectations, and instead of building around him from the jump, instead of giving him first-team reps consistently, instead of treating him like the future, it's been this back-and-forth situation. One week he's getting reps, the next week he's barely seeing the field in practice. The depth chart decisions have been all over the place. Other quarterbacks have been getting opportunities before him, and when Shedeur finally does get his shot, it's not in the cleanest situation. The offensive line has been inconsistent all year. The running game hasn't been there. The receivers, outside of a few flashes, haven't been creating separation consistently. So when people look at Shedeur's stats and say he's struggling, I need y'all to ask yourselves, is that really on him? Or is that on everything around him? Because here's the thing. This game against the Bengals, that first half was rough. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Shedeur looked uncomfortable. He was holding the ball too long. The pocket was collapsing every other play. The offensive line, and I gotta be real with y'all, they were getting cooked. Shedeur was running for his life back there. 6 sacks in one game is not normal. That's not a quarterback problem, that's a protection problem. And when you can't run the football, when the defense knows you have to throw, when your receivers aren't winning their matchups, what exactly is a young quarterback supposed to do? He's supposed to just magically make it work? That's not realistic. That's not fair. And yet, that's exactly what people were expecting from him. That's exactly what the media was waiting to criticize him for. Now let's talk about the second half, because this is where it gets interesting. Tommy Rees and Kevin Stefanski, the coaching staff, they made adjustments. And I need y'all to hear this clearly. They put Shedeur in a position to succeed. High-tempo offense, quick rhythm throws, getting the ball out fast, letting him work off play action, giving him easy completions to build confidence. And guess what happened? Shedeur started moving the ball. Jerry Jeudy started making plays. The offensive line, with the faster tempo, didn't have to hold blocks as long. Suddenly the entire offense looked different. Suddenly they're marching down the field. Suddenly they're putting points on the board. And at the end of the game, they walked away with a win against a division rival, against Joe Burrow and the Cincinnati Bengals. That's not a small thing. That's not something you just brush off. But here's where my mind starts going, and I want y'all to think about this with me. If the coaching staff knew how to adjust the offense in the second half, if they knew how to put Shedeur in a better position, if they knew the offensive line needed help with tempo and quick throws, why didn't they start the game like that? Why did it take a full half of getting dominated for them to make those changes? And I'm not saying this to accuse anybody of anything. I'm not saying there's some conspiracy here. I'm just asking the question that I think a lot of Browns fans are asking right now. Why does it feel like Shedeur has to prove himself over and over again in situations that aren't set up for him to succeed? Why does it feel like he's getting tested in ways that other young quarterbacks around the league aren't? Let's talk about the 2-game winning streak, because this is important context. Shedeur just beat the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Cincinnati Bengals back-to-back. Those are 2 division rivals. Those are 2 teams that know the Browns, that have film on the Browns, that are not easy outs. And Shedeur found a way to win both of those games. Now, the stats aren't pretty. The tape isn't perfect. There are absolutely things he needs to clean up. But at the end of the day, wins matter. And for a young quarterback who's been thrown into a messy situation, who's had to deal with inconsistent opportunities, who's had to fight for every rep, those 2 wins say something. They say he's got composure. They say he doesn't fold under pressure. They say he can rally through adversity. And that's the part that I think people are missing. Everybody wants to focus on the 11 for 22 stat line. Everybody wants to talk about the 111 yards. But nobody wants to talk about the fact that he got sacked 6 times and still found a way to lead his team to a win. Nobody wants to talk about the fact that the offensive line was getting destroyed in the first half, and he didn't panic, he didn't crumble, he kept fighting. That's not something you can teach. That's not something you can coach into a player. That's either in you or it's not. And Shedeur showed that he's got it. Now let's be real about Jerry Jeudy for a second, because this needs to be said. Jerry came through at the end of the game, and that's great. But there were moments in this game where he needed to do more. There was a pass in the footage where he didn't even reach for the ball. Like, fully didn't extend. Just let it sail by him. And I'm watching that thinking, bro, your quarterback just took 6 sacks trying to get you the ball, and you're not going to lay out for a catch? That's frustrating. That's the kind of stuff that makes life harder for a young quarterback. Because when you're already dealing with pressure, when you're already dealing with a shaky offensive line, when you're already dealing with inconsistent play calling, you need your weapons to make plays. You need your receivers to bail you out sometimes. And in that moment, Jerry didn't. Now, I'm not saying he had a bad game overall. I'm saying there are moments where more was needed, and that's just facts. Myles Garrett had himself a game too, and we gotta acknowledge that. He got the sack on Joe Burrow that gave him the regular season sack leader record. That's huge for him individually, and it's huge for the defense. Because while the offense was struggling to find its rhythm, the defense was keeping them in the game. That's what championship teams do. That's what complementary football looks like. The defense holds it down while the offense figures it out, and then the offense steps up when it matters. And that's exactly what happened in this game. But let's zoom out for a second, because I want to talk about what this means for Shedeur's future with the Browns. The front office is watching this. They're evaluating. They're trying to figure out if Shedeur is the guy they can build around long term. And here's what I think they're seeing. They're seeing a kid who's tough. They're seeing a kid who doesn't quit. They're seeing a kid who can win games against good teams in tough environments. But they're also seeing a kid who needs help. He needs a better offensive line. He needs more consistency in the play calling. He needs weapons who are going to make plays when the ball is in the air. And the question is, are they willing to invest in those things? Are they willing to put the pieces around him to actually give him a fair shot? Because here's the uncomfortable truth. If the Browns don't build around Shedeur, if they keep putting him in situations where he's set up to struggle, then it doesn't matter how tough he is. It doesn't matter how much heart he has. He's going to get labeled as a bust, and they're going to move on to the next guy. And that would be a shame, because from what we've seen, this kid has the tools. He's got the arm. He's got the intelligence. He's got the composure. He just needs the situation to match his ability. Now let's talk about the media reaction to this game, because that's been wild to watch. Before this game, the narrative around Shedeur was all negative. People were questioning if he belonged in the league. People were saying he was overhyped because of his name. People were acting like he was a guaranteed failure. And then he goes out and wins 2 straight division games, and suddenly the tone shifts. Suddenly people are saying, well, maybe there's something there. Suddenly people are willing to give him credit. And I'm sitting here thinking, y'all didn't see this coming? Y'all really thought a kid who did what he did in college, who has the pedigree he has, who has the work ethic he has, was just gonna fold? That's wild to me. But this is how the media works. They build you up to tear you down, and then they act surprised when you prove them wrong. And Shedeur's handling it the right way. He's not out here talking crazy. He's not calling people out. He's just going out there and playing football. And that's mature beyond his years. Because a lot of young quarterbacks in his position would be emotional, would be defensive, would be trying to prove everybody wrong with their words. But Shedeur is letting his play do the talking. And I respect that. The fan reactions have been all over the place too. Browns fans, from what I've been seeing, are split. You've got one group that's all in on Shedeur. They see the potential. They see the toughness. They want the front office to build around him and give him a real chance. And then you've got another group that's skeptical. They look at the stats, they see the struggles, and they're not convinced yet. They want to see more before they commit to him as the future. And I get both sides, honestly. I understand why fans are hesitant after years of quarterback disappointment in Cleveland. But I also think there's something different about Shedeur. There's a maturity there, a calm under pressure, that you don't see from every young quarterback. Let's talk about the expectations and pressure that come with being Shedeur Sanders, because that's a real factor here. This isn't just some random draft pick. This is the son of Deion Sanders. This is a kid who grew up in the spotlight, who's had cameras on him his entire life, who's had people doubting him and critiquing him since he was in high school. And that comes with a unique set of challenges, because no matter what he does, people are going to compare him to his dad. People are going to say he only got opportunities because of his name. People are going to hold him to an impossible standard. And that's not fair, but it's the reality. And here's what I've noticed about Shedeur. He doesn't seem rattled by any of it. He doesn't seem overwhelmed. He carries himself with a confidence that's not arrogance. It's just belief in his own ability. And in the NFL, that's half the battle. Because this league will break you mentally if you let it. The speed of the game, the complexity of the defenses, the pressure from fans and media. It's too much for a lot of players. But Shedeur looks like he's built for it. He looks like he can handle the noise and just focus on football. Now, let's get into some of the specific moments from this game that stood out to me. There was a play in the second half where Shedeur took a shot downfield to Jerry Jeudy on a deep post route. The throw was a little behind, but Jeudy adjusted and came down with it. That's the kind of trust you need between a quarterback and a receiver. That's the kind of connection that takes time to build. And the fact that they're starting to develop that chemistry is a good sign for the future. There was another play where Shedeur escaped pressure, rolled to his right, and fired a dart across his body for a first down. That's not something every quarterback can do. That takes arm strength, that takes mobility, and that takes awareness. And Shedeur made it look easy. But there were also moments where you could see the growing pains. There was a play where he held the ball too long trying to extend the play, and he took an unnecessary sack. There was another play where he missed an open receiver on a crossing route and forced a throw into coverage. These are mistakes that young quarterbacks make. These are things that get cleaned up with experience and coaching. But they're also things that people are going to use against him if he doesn't fix them quickly. The thing that keeps coming back to me, though, is the way the coaching staff adjusted at halftime. Because that tells me they know what Shedeur is capable of. That tells me they know how to put him in positions to succeed. So why aren't they doing that from the start? Why does it feel like they're making him earn it the hard way? And again, I'm not accusing anyone of anything. I'm not saying there's some grand plan to sabotage him. I'm just saying it's uncomfortable to watch. It raises questions. It makes you wonder if there's more going on behind the scenes that we don't know about. Let's talk about the offensive line for a minute because this is a critical piece of the puzzle. Shedeur got sacked 6 times in this game. That's unacceptable. I don't care who your quarterback is, you cannot let him take that kind of punishment. And it's not just about the sacks. It's about the hits he's taking, the pressure he's feeling on almost every drop back. That wears on a quarterback mentally and physically. It makes it harder to stay confident in the pocket. It makes it harder to trust your protection. And for a young quarterback, that can be devastating to his development. The Browns need to invest in that offensive line this offseason. They need to bring in talent, whether that's through the draft, through free agency, or through trades. Because if they keep trotting out the same inconsistent group, then it doesn't matter how good Shedeur is. He's not going to have time to go through his progressions. He's not going to have time to let plays develop downfield. He's going to be running for his life every week, and that's not sustainable. The running game is another issue. The Browns couldn't run the ball in the first half, and that put everything on Shedeur's shoulders. When you're one-dimensional, when the defense knows you have to throw, it makes life so much harder for a quarterback. You need balance. You need to be able to run the ball to set up play action, to keep the defense honest, to control the clock. And the Browns didn't have that in this game. So not only was Shedeur dealing with a bad offensive line, he was also dealing with no run game to take pressure off of him. That's a recipe for disaster. But here's what's impressive. Despite all of that, despite everything working against him, Shedeur still found a way to lead his team to a win. That speaks to his mental toughness. That speaks to his ability to stay composed in chaos. And that's the kind of trait that you can't teach. You either have it or you don't. Let me bring it back to the bigger picture for a second. The Cleveland Browns are at a crossroads. They've got a young quarterback who's shown flashes, who's won games, who's demonstrated toughness and composure. But they've also got a roster that needs work. They've got an offensive line that's not good enough. They've got a receiving core that's inconsistent. They've got a running game that's not reliable. So the question for the front office is, do they believe in Shedeur enough to invest in fixing those things? Do they believe he's the guy who can lead this franchise for the next decade? Or are they going to hedge their bets, draft another quarterback, and start the cycle all over again? And here's why that decision matters. If they commit to Shedeur, if they build around him the right way, they could have something special. They could have a franchise quarterback who's tough, who's smart, who can win in big moments. But if they don't commit, if they keep him in this limbo where he's constantly having to prove himself, then they're going to waste his potential. And that would be a tragedy, not just for Shedeur, but for Browns fans who've been waiting for stability at the quarterback position for years. The national media is starting to pay attention to Shedeur now, and that comes with its own set of challenges. There are analysts breaking down his film. There are talking heads debating whether he's the real deal. There are hot takes flying around everywhere. And all of that noise can be a distraction if you let it. But from what I've seen, Shedeur's not letting it get to him. He's staying focused on the work. He's staying focused on getting better every week. And that's the right approach. Let's also talk about the comparison to other young quarterbacks around the league. You've got guys like C.J. Stroud who came in and had immediate success. You've got guys like Bryce Young who've struggled in tough situations. You've got guys like Anthony Richardson who've shown flashes but dealt with injuries. And then you've got Shedeur, who's somewhere in the middle. He's not lighting the league on fire, but he's also not completely falling apart. He's grinding, he's learning, he's winning games. And I think that's getting overlooked in all the noise. The thing about quarterback development is that it's not linear. Some guys come in ready to play right away. Other guys need time to adjust to the speed of the NFL, to learn how to read defenses, to build chemistry with their weapons. And there's no shame in that. The problem is, in today's NFL, young quarterbacks don't always get that time. Teams want instant results. Fans want instant results. The media wants instant results. And if you don't deliver right away, the narrative turns negative real quick. Shedeur's in that pressure cooker right now. He's being evaluated with every throw, with every decision, with every game. And the margin for error is razor thin. One bad game and people will say he's a bust. One great game and people will say he's the future. There's no middle ground. There's no patience. And that's unfortunate because the reality is that he's a young player who's still developing, who's still learning, who's still figuring out how to be great in this league. But here's what gives me hope. Despite all the pressure, despite all the scrutiny, despite all the challenges, Shedeur keeps showing up. He keeps competing. He keeps finding ways to win. And that's all you can ask from a young quarterback. You can't expect perfection. You can't expect him to be a finished product in his first year. But you can expect effort. You can expect improvement. And you can expect competitiveness. And Shedeur's giving you all of that. Now, Mikey. There's been talk from insiders and analysts about how the Browns are viewing Shedeur internally. And from what's been discussed in media circles, there seems to be a divide. Some people in the building love him, they see the potential, they want to build around him. Other people are more cautious, they want to see more before they commit. And that's creating this weird dynamic where Shedeur's future feels uncertain even though he's out here winning games. And that's what's so frustrating about this whole situation. Because if the Browns don't know what they have in Shedeur after watching him compete, after watching him win division games, after watching him show toughness and composure, then what more do they need to see? What's the bar here? Because it feels like the bar keeps moving. It feels like no matter what he does, it's not quite enough. And that's a dangerous place to be as an organization because you could end up letting a good quarterback slip through your fingers while you're chasing perfection. The offensive scheme is another thing worth discussing. Tommy Rees has been calling plays, and there's been some criticism of the play calling throughout the season. Some fans think it's too conservative. Some think it doesn't play to Shedeur's strengths. Others think it's fine, and that the execution just needs to be better. And honestly, all of those perspectives have some validity. There have been games where the play calling felt too safe, where they weren't taking enough shots downfield, where they were playing not to lose instead of playing to win. But there have also been games where the play calling was aggressive and creative, and the players just didn't execute. The second half of this Bengals game is a perfect example of what the offense can look like when everything clicks. The tempo was faster, the concepts were cleaner, the execution was sharper, and the result was points on the board and a win. So the question is, why can't they do that for a full game? Why does it take falling behind for them to open up the playbook? And again, I'm not trying to bash the coaches here. I'm just asking questions that I think are fair to ask. Let's talk about Jerry Jeudy again for a second because his role in this offense is crucial. He's supposed to be the #1 receiver. He's supposed to be the guy who makes life easier for the quarterback. And to his credit, he has made plays this season. But there have also been too many moments where he's disappeared, where he's dropped passes, where he's not created separation. And for a young quarterback, that inconsistency from your top weapon makes everything harder. Shedeur needs a receiver he can trust blindly. He needs a guy who's going to win his matchups, who's going to make contested catches, who's going to bail him out when plays break down. And right now, I'm not sure if Jerry Jeudy is that guy. Maybe he can become that guy. Maybe with more time and more chemistry with Shedeur, he'll elevate his game. But as of right now, it's a question mark. And that's not ideal for a young quarterback trying to establish himself. The defense deserves a lot of credit too. They kept the Browns in this game when the offense was struggling. They got pressure on Joe Burrow. They forced him into tough throws. They made key stops when they needed to. And Myles Garrett was a monster. That sack record is just icing on the cake for the kind of season he's had. He's been dominant all year, and he showed up again in a big moment. But here's the thing about having a great defense. It buys your offense time. It keeps games close. It gives your young quarterback chances to learn and grow without the pressure of having to be perfect. And that's exactly what happened in this game. The defense held it down. And when Shedeur and the offense finally got rolling in the second half, they were able to capitalize and win the game. Now let's get into the fan reactions again, because this has been fascinating to watch. Browns fans are passionate. They're loyal. They've been through decades of quarterback instability, and they're desperate for someone to finally be the answer. So when Shedeur shows flashes, they get excited. When he struggles, they get nervous. And social media has been a battlefield of opinions. You've got fans who are all in on Shedeur, defending him against every criticism, pointing out all the context and circumstances that make his job harder. And then you've got fans who are skeptical, who've been burned too many times before, who need to see sustained success before they believe. And I get both sides. I really do. If you're a Browns fan, you've watched quarterbacks come and go for years. You've watched high draft picks fail. You've watched veteran acquisitions flame out. You've watched this team chase the position and come up empty over and over again. So it makes sense that you'd be hesitant to invest emotionally in another young quarterback. It makes sense that you'd want to see more before you get your hopes up. But at the same time, there's something different about Shedeur. There's a calmness to him. There's a maturity. There's a competitive fire that you can see on tape. And he's winning games. He's beating division rivals. He's showing toughness in the face of adversity. And at some point, you have to acknowledge that and give him credit for it. The comparisons to other quarterbacks in Browns history are inevitable. People are comparing him to Baker Mayfield, to Johnny Manziel, to every quarterback who's come through Cleveland and failed. And that's not fair to Shedeur because he's his own player with his own strengths and weaknesses. But that's the reality of playing quarterback in Cleveland. You're going to be compared to everyone who came before you, and you're going to be judged based on whether you can finally break the curse. Let's talk about the offensive coordinator situation for a minute. Kevin Stefanski is calling plays as the head coach, but there's been talk about whether the Browns need a dedicated offensive coordinator who can focus solely on the offense. And I think there's merit to that conversation. Because as good as Stefanski has been as a head coach overall, the offensive play calling has been inconsistent. And maybe having someone whose only job is to design and call plays would benefit Shedeur and the offense as a whole. But that's a decision for the front office to make in the offseason. For now, the focus needs to be on finishing the season strong and evaluating what they have in Shedeur Sanders. This game against the Bengals is going to be studied by the coaching staff. They're going to break down every play, every decision, every adjustment, and they're going to use that information to figure out what works and what doesn't with Shedeur at quarterback. Because at the end of the day, that's what this whole process is about. It's about gathering information, evaluating talent, and making informed decisions about the future. And here's what I think they're seeing. They're seeing a quarterback who's tough enough to handle the NFL. They're seeing a quarterback who can win games when it matters. They're seeing a quarterback who doesn't panic under pressure. But they're also seeing a quarterback who needs help. He needs better protection. He needs more weapons. He needs a more consistent running game. And if they can provide those things, then I think Shedeur has a real chance to be something special in this league. But if they don't, if they keep putting him in situations where he's set up to fail, then it's not going to matter how talented he is. He's going to get chewed up and spit out like so many young quarterbacks before him. And that would be a shame, because from everything we've seen, this kid deserves a fair shot. The national narrative around Shedeur is shifting after this game. People are starting to take notice. Analysts who dismissed him before are now giving him credit. Media members who doubted him are now acknowledging his toughness. And that's good for him, but it's also dangerous. Because with more attention comes more pressure. with more praise comes higher expectations. And if he has a bad game next week, all of that positive momentum can evaporate real quick. That's the volatility of being a young quarterback in the NFL. Your stock can rise and fall from week to week based on one performance. And you have to be mentally strong enough to handle that roller coaster. You have to be able to block out the noise, stay focused on your process, and just keep working. And from what I've seen, Shedeur has that mentality. But the question that keeps nagging at me, the question that I can't shake, is whether the Browns organization truly believes in him. Because belief matters. When a team fully commits to a young quarterback, when they go all in on building around him, it shows. The player feels it. The coaching staff adjusts to maximize his strengths. The front office prioritizes getting him the weapons and protection he needs. And right now, I'm not sure if the Browns are at that point yet. There seems to be hesitation, there seems to be uncertainty, and that's what makes this whole situation so uncomfortable to watch. Because Shedeur is out here doing everything you'd want from a young quarterback. He's competing, he's winning, he's showing toughness. But it feels like it's not enough. It feels like he's constantly having to prove himself over and over again. And at some point, that gets exhausting. The offseason is going to be crucial. The decisions the Browns make in free agency, in the draft, in their coaching staff, all of that is going to signal where they stand on Shedeur Sanders. If they go out and get him offensive linemen, if they bring in another weapon at receiver, if they make moves that clearly indicate they're building around him, then we'll know they believe. But if they're quiet, if they're non-committal, if they draft another quarterback early, then we'll know they're not sold. And Browns fans deserve to know. They deserve clarity. They've been in quarterback purgatory for too long. They deserve to know if Shedeur is the guy or if the team is still searching. Because the worst thing you can do as an organization is stay in this middle ground where you're not fully committed either way. That's how you waste years. That's how you squander opportunities. That's how you end up right back where you started. So where does this leave us? Shedeur Sanders just beat the Cincinnati Bengals in a game where everything was working against him. The offensive line was terrible. The running game was non-existent. He got sacked 6 times. And he still found a way to rally in the second half and lead his team to victory. That says something about his character. That says something about his competitiveness. That says something about his potential. But it also raises more questions than it answers. Why did it take a half for the coaching staff to adjust? Why does Shedeur keep being put in difficult situations? What does the front office really think about him? And what are they going to do this offseason to either support him or move on from him? Those are the questions Browns fans are asking right now. Those are the questions the media is starting to ask. And those are the questions that don't have clear answers yet, because we're still in the evaluation phase. We're still watching. We're still waiting to see what happens next. And that's where we are. Shedeur Sanders just won his second straight game against a division rival. He showed toughness, he showed composure, he showed he can win when it matters. But the story's not over. There's still so much unknown. There's still so much uncertainty. And until the Browns make their intentions clear, until they commit one way or the other, we're all just going to keep watching, keep wondering, and keep waiting to see what comes next.